I just wish, like, for God's sake, I just wish people would see PHP in 2025 without any preconceptions, you know what I mean? This is not something I would do myself. I would probably just have this on the controller itself. Everything can be made into CRUD if you think a little bit about that. Something that cannot be made into CRUD is a search. That's actually a very good example of something that would be invokable. 2DTO, that's actually interesting. I like that. That's actually a very good idea. When you look at code, it sometimes is more about the code being consistent rather than just being wrong, okay? What's up everyone, it's Nuno here. Just a quick reminder that 50% of the people watching this video are not subscribers yet. If you like the video, please click on subscribe. Thank you so much. Today, chat, we are literally code reviewing this project, which is a Laravel backend. A lot of people are indeed choosing to have a separate repo for the backend and another repo for the frontend. You guys know me, I'm a big fan of monorepos. I typically like to have my backend in Laravel, and then I have the inertia protocol to communicate my Laravel backend with my frontend built typically with React or Vue.js. I do feel like choosing a monorepo is just a better option. What is your option personally? Do you typically like to have two separate repos? I don't feel the need for that, and I do think that a monorepo is always a better choice. So this project apparently is a backend for a marketplace application, okay? I don't actually follow any modular structures, okay, chat? Actually, recently I talked with a developer about the way we organize Laravel applications, okay? And some of the things we talk about is literally how exactly your Laravel application will be structured. And he was saying to me that he likes to have literally separate modules for his own applications. For example, here will be something like like sales, for example. In here we are going to have articles. In here we are going to have users. And then within each one of these modules, he was organizing things like, you know, HTTP layer with controllers, and then there is this articles folder with controllers as well. And finally, you know, every single folder would have its own HTTP layer or its own models layer, okay? I typically don't organize my monorepos this way. I'm gonna be honest with you, all right? I typically, what I do is that I like to have the flat structure Laravel gives me. So I have pretty much all of the models within the same folder. I have all of the controllers, no matter where they are or where they are coming from, they will be always placed within app HTTP, okay? So typically, the way I organize Laravel projects is what you typically would find on any Laravel application. So all my controllers, no matter where they are coming from, will be placed on this exact folder. All my models, no matter which models are, they will be placed within the app models folder or organizing by type, which I'm a very fan of, okay? People like to say that this doesn't scale. I can tell you that I have built huge applications and this have always scaled, no problem whatsoever. Let me know what you think, okay? Readme is saying the modular or the structure will depend on the size of the project. In my opinion, I don't typically care of the size. In organizing by types, always works for me, okay? All right, chat, let's jump a little bit into the code structure of this project. And honestly, just looking at this already, something I'm having fun looking at is there is no modules. So I don't see like sales and articles and books and whatever. I literally see everything organized by type. So if I want to see the models, I can just click on this folder. If I want to see the HTTP layer, I can just click on this folder. If I want to see all of the DTOs, I can click on this folder. Something that allows me to literally just click and understand the full logic here. I can just click on models and almost understand the full database just looking into this, okay? Probably a user can have, you know, multiple products. A product can have one category, multiple comments, multiple media. So I just love jumping into the models folder and just immediately have just a glimpse of everything we are going to find on this project. I love this situation, and I feel like this is the way I also build my own Laravel applications. Okay, chat? Okay. Also, we talked a little bit about commit messages, for example. So if I click here on this project, I can immediately understand that he's probably using some of the conventions we talked about before. For example, using the prefix refactor when you want to actually just retouch some existing code without changing everything. This is actually a very cool thing. Again, I can just immediately look into this and see that understand that this is actually a new feature, so also a good thing. And probably if he has some bug fixes, I would probably find just fix instead of feat. So this is called conventional commits, I think. Let me just double check that for you real quick. Yeah, here we go. Conventional commits. Okay, Chad, this is literally a convention that a lot of experts follow. I don't know if you guys follow this already, but let me know. Write down the chat if you actually already follow this convention, or if you don't. So let's click here into application once again, jump into the models, and I want to look into the user model to see what we are going to find here. Okay, this is actually a cool thing, making sure we have very good auto completion in our models. I told you this, guys, already. Having this property annotations on top of every single model is actually a very good thing. I would probably only change these properties here to properly read, because technically I will always use the update. So I don't use, just attribute assignments to change properties. So I would probably just use property read in every single attributes we are going to find here. But this is actually a very good thing as well. So we have this as factory, which is literally the factory for this model, which this model is also notifiable. We have a bunch of hidden fields, which is good. Our relations properly annotated with PHP stan generic types. This is actually also very good. Ooh. Okay, solid stuff here. Nothing really to say about this. I would probably code this in the same way. Let's jump into products, for example. Everything is fully annotated on top as well, using Spatie Media Library for images. I don't know if you guys know, but actually Spatie Media Library is an awesome package if you want to actually have images associated with your models. I immediately understand that he follows this small models approach. I'm a big fan of small models, not fat models. So I like to have my models super simple, typically with a couple of things like the properties all the way top and just all of my relations alongside with casting and hidden attributes, and I typically feel that this is the way to go. I don't like to have things like queries on my models, okay? I typically have those aside, okay? So models are absolutely validated on this project. Let's jump, for example, into the provider situation. Let's see this. Okay, this guy absolutely inspired himself on my stuff because I do this all the time, like literally. If you click on my vest kit, for example, I literally have these 4 lines right there, okay? But you guys know, like, it's very important to have a single app service provider that makes sure no destructive commands happen in production, make sure you use immutable dates, make sure you use unguard, but also that all models should be strict, and obviously aggressive prefetching for Vit. There is cool things here, but probably would have a few more to make this a little bit more complete, okay? Better password defaults, force HTTPS layers, and a bunch of other Laravel defaults that are actually very good to have on this project, okay? Automatically eager load, exactly. Okay, solid stuff here. Let's take a look into the HTTP layer, which typically is organized exactly. API, for example, and I can click on search controller to take a peek on this. Okay, it's actually doing something here which I typically don't, which is having this service layer. Let me take a peek into that a little bit. What is this service layer? Search service. Yep, this is not something I would do myself. I would probably just have this on the controller itself. I find like some people like to have this service layer to literally just encapsulate stuff you would do on the controller itself. I do feel like, especially stuff like querying, for example, I would probably just keep that really simple on the controller. And if I have things like that would mutate my application, I would use actions for it. I don't know what you guys think, but I typically, especially when my controller is super simple, I like to also keep it simple. There is no need to abstract, some of those queries to a separate class if they are only be invokable on my controllers, okay? So typically here, something I would probably do is, if you want to make a search, just have the query right here, okay? just have the query right here. That probably would make it a tons more simple. Undeniably, he is using resources as well, which is okay. Like using resources is actually okay. The only thing I would probably do is having this query just being performed right here, because I do think it makes things a little bit more simple. So let's jump, for example, into this show controller. I would also not use invocable controllers for this, okay? Definitely using invocable controllers, not always, but sometimes it's kind of overkill. So here is definitely overkill. I would probably only have, I would click on V1 and have this product controller, which would contain the index and the show. Kind of not have this thing as a separate class. I think it's kind of overkill. What do you guys think? Do you guys also use like invocable controllers all the time? I don't, like honestly. I think it's overkill, like especially just looking into this, having an invocable controller for the index and another invocable controller for the show is definitely overkill. I would just have public function index and public function show, that's it. Ivo Freire is saying that I also don't use invocable controllers that way. All right, you are with me on that one. I totally agree with you. Konstantin Tiklo is saying the following: I use invocable only for functions that are not cruddy. Exactly, just like me. So I typically, if I have a controller, for example, that only exists for receiving a post, so they goes outside of the CRUD situation, I may make it like invocable. But Space is saying developers are the only people who learn while working. Absolutely, man. Mateus Junges is saying that I use resourceful controllers for CRUD methods, otherwise it's invocable. Yeah, what do I feel is that everything can be made into cruddy, basically, okay? Almost like it's very rare that I use invocable, because if you have user, for example, a user can have obviously like the index, the create, the store. Let's actually make this a product, okay? You can have all of this, right? But if you think, for example, on product image, for example, okay, you can also make this like literally cruddy as well. This is probably just update, you know what I mean? Update and destroy, if you want to just update the image and destroy the image. Everything can be made into cruddy if you think a little bit about that. If you spend enough time thinking on naming, everything can be made into being cruddy in terms of controllers. I guess just like Roberts is saying, that's actually a very good example. Something that cannot be made into cruddy is a search. That's actually a very good example of something that would be invocable. Because, I mean, the product image is actually a resource, and the product is also a resource, but the search is not a resource, therefore it is invocable. That's actually a very good example. Ooh, very good question from Luis. What do you think about auth as cruddy? So typically, I like to have this current session controller. And I make this thing like cruddy as well. So if you do something like store, this will basically log in the user. If you have a destroy, this will log out the user. So when you click on login, it's actually going into this current session controller. And when you have something like log out, it will destroy the current section. And here you go. This is literally a resource, the current section. How about the deactivate and activate function? That's actually a very good question. So for example, let's assume you have this product, and a product have a status, which might be active, or let's say published and unpublished, okay? So a common problem that people may find on this is that sometimes they have this feeling of, okay, I'm going to basically do some, potentially product publish controller and make it invocable, and have this probably unpublished controller. So this is actually something I don't do, because I feel like you can make this cruddy as well. So the way I would do this is probably have this product status controller, and this will have an update, and the update will only receive either two status, the first one being published, and the second one being unpublished. And the very cool thing about this kind of pattern is that if you want to kind of expand a little bit the enum to other statuses, like, oh my god, autocomplete is annoying. If you want to expand a little bit this enum, like something like draft or whatever, you can just do it and accept a new status type, okay? So the product status, just like the product image, will be a resource. In terms of this HTTP layer, looks obviously well coded. I probably would change a few things. I don't think there is a need of invocable controllers all the time. So probably would have just product controller only. This search controller can indeed be invocable because it's not a resource and not something that can be made into cruddy. But good stuff here. Good stuff on the HTTP layer. So what else do we have? We have the DTOs layer. And we talked a little bit about this on the a few time in the past, that I'm actually open to explore a little bit the DTO layer, in the sense that sometimes you have this actions pattern, right? Something that looks into like this. You have potentially like a public function store which accepts a create request, for example. But then you have also like the create action, okay? We talked about this a little bit in the past. And one of the problems I find while coding is that the action will literally just receive an array of data you want to execute this action with. And some of you talked about that this might be a little bit unsafe because this validated stuff will be actually an array, okay? Will be actually an array. So not an object, not a fully typed object. And we talked about like literally just having this product, a DTO, which can be created from this array and then be a fully typed object that you may provide to the action layer. And I kind of like this a little bit. I think it's actually a very good pattern that I'm willing to explore. Okay. Ooh, Luis Cruz is saying a very important thing, I guess. He's a very fan of actually having this 2DTO on the request class that returns that fully typed object. So I guess what you're saying is that instead of literally doing this on the controller itself, you probably would do this, right? 2DTO. That's actually interesting. I like that. That's actually a very good idea. DTOs. Okay, we talked about this. We talked about the HTTP layer. We talked about models. We talked about the app providers. Queries folder to encapsulate complex queries. We talked about this in previous streams already. I'm a big fan of this kind of stuff, literally encapsulate complex queries on the queries folder. And I'm not fan of the services folder, unless you are communicating with outside services, okay? All right, chat. Something I like to see immediately is the README, okay? So I'm going to jump all the way down to see the README. And apparently this is an Offerly API. So this is the API for the Offerly project, which is a marketplace application. It was created to help people share their projects or services in a more organized way. I appreciate that this piece of content wasn't AI generated. Chat, I'm going to tell you something. I do hate to see AI generated text. If you want to do a pull request, write the README or whatever, just don't use AI garbage for generate that huge text, okay? Every single time I'm reviewing open source code and I do see like a pull request with a bunch of AI garbage, it's like to the trash immediately, because it tells me that the guy didn't even spend 5 minutes crafting a text for me. And then we have the installation. So something really important when you are crafting a Laravel application is making sure that the README contains clear documentation about to set up the project locally, okay? And you want to make sure this stuff is up to date. So every now and then, just clone your project locally, try to set up the project from scratch to see if actually works, okay? So this is actually a good thing. I can immediately just, do some git clones, sail ups, some composer install, npm install, do this crap, php and migrate, and that's it. He's also using PostgreSQL. I told you guys, in 2025, especially within this Python, Ruby, PHP ecosystem, we are going to see a lot of people migrating to PostgreSQL. Okay. I have the feeling that, MySQL is kind of staying a little bit behind, especially with this vector searching situation coming to the scene with AI. A lot of these databases require, or a lot of these applications actually require vector searching. So, I feel that PostgreSQLite is a very, very good choice, chat. Okay, chat, let's jump into the test, which I immediately see that he uses some of the conventions I love, which is features only contains like HTTP layer, jobs layer, and console layer. But then if I jump into the unit level, I get to see things being tested in a more granular way, like just queries or, models. Ooh, and I do see that he uses repositories, okay, chat? This will be an interesting one. Let me see as well the architectural testing to see what do we find here, okay? So this is something I typically do. This was very likely to be just copied from one of my projects, probably just one of the many I have out there, which is open source. Pretty cool stuff here. Pretty cool stuff. So if you don't know, architectural testing is a very powerful feature in past PHP. Allows you to basically making sure that the code looks structurally, but also very modular, and there is no interdependencies between modules that shouldn't have dependencies. One very good example I like to give is models, for example. I don't know if he has an example here. Let me see. Exactly. Models is actually a very good example because you want to make sure that all of the models, are only be used in certain layers of your project. So this is actually a very good test that you can have in your Laravel projects to ensure that everything is super modular and very well organized, okay? Architectural testing for the win. Lee Press is saying the following: I love Laravel and I use it for many projects, but I'm wondering if it's a good fit for building microservices since that is the next step for an app of my company. Do you have any experience with that? I do feel like it really depends on the microservice you are developing. I'm going to give you an example. If you want to build like a very, very micro thing, like something that exports Excels or whatever, it probably, using a web framework is probably indeed too much. But if you want to build something that will probably contain validation, you will need queue jobs potentially, probably an HTTP endpoint, I would probably already jump into Laravel, because Laravel is probably actually a good fit for those kind of situations. You know what I mean? So Laravel is awesome for those, even for those microservices. So again, chat, just looking at this task structure, I do see some of the things I love about testing in general, okay? One of the things is that he actually have this feature level structure in this unit level structure. Typically, again, the feature level structure is where I do like to have all of the entry points of my app. And typically this will be the HTTP layer, the jobs layer, and the console layer, because are literally entry points to my application. So that's a good thing. And just looking, for example, into the HTTP layer, I get to see, for example, that one of those HTTP layers are literally a regular API, and I can jump into this search controller test to see this API endpoint actually being tested. So something here I'm seeing already is getting JSON and assert the response of that same JSON endpoint. So this is actually very solid stuff here, okay? I do see again that this guy is watching my streams, which is awesome. And again, at unit level, we get to see a little bit that things being tested in isolation. There's a couple of things that immediately jump into my mind about this fault structure that I possibly will question. One of them is the repositories layer. I'm not a fan of repositories, you guys know me, but also like DTOs being tested. If DTOs are simply objects that hold data, I don't see a reason why I would ever test them unless he added actually behavior into this DTOs, which is something which is also questionable, okay? But we are going to have time to see all of that, chat. We are going to have time to see all of that. Now, that was a testing layer. I want to see as well, still regarding the testing layer, how exactly this project is organized in terms of CI. So obviously, if I click on Git workflows, I get to see immediately that this guy uses GitHub Actions for running his CI. And honestly, probably everyone should be using GitHub Actions. There is only one thing that sucks on GitHub Actions, which is they are actually super slow. But besides that situation, it's actually cool, okay? It's actually cool. GitHub Actions just works. You can have literally all your CI duties over there, and it's really awesome, okay? It's running on top of Ubuntu latest version, PHP 8.4, and if I go all the way down, I get to see that he runs Composer test, which is actually also a good thing. This is also another thing that also comes from my streams, is that typically I like to have a Composer test script which runs my entire CI. So if I jump into my composer.json, I do expect to see, type checking and there we go, all of those cool things. And we talked a bunch about this shit. It's very important for someone coming to your project to be sure that the only thing they have to do to run the test suite is type composer test, no matter how complicated your test suite is. Remember, Shad, always remember this. Just imagine you arriving to a company and they tell you, oh, to run the CI, you need to type vendor bin whatever, and you need to run npm run XYZ, and you need to type blah, 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 and you need to type whatever. Just imagine have to memorize all of these commands, okay? It's just a total mess. So what do is literally, you just encapsulate all of that within a single composer test. So people, the only thing they have to do is type composer test, and that automatically will run your entire CI. And we are talking about type coverage, Rector PHP, which is literally styling. We are talking about linked with Paint, which is equally styling. We're talking about type coverage or type checking with PHP's TypeScript, which is PHP stan, and equally past PHP in parallel with coverage 100%. Honestly, this is awesome, chat. And if you're not doing this already, you probably should, okay? You probably should. I just wish, like, for God's sake, I just wish people would see PHP in 2025 without any preconceptions, you know what I mean? Because I feel like if people would jump into PHP right now, they will be like, holy shit, what is this new language? Looks awesome. If they would jump into PHP, like right now, from scratch, they probably would be, holy shit, I love this new language. I love this new language. I told you once, but I told you twice, something very important is making sure you are using fully all of the tools you have at your availability, okay? So remember, if you are using Paint, just be sure not be, kind of with the default options that Paint gives you. Not a lot of people know about this, but you can actually heavily customize Paint. And I'm seeing already, jumping into this Paint.json, that this guy have actually done a bunch of stuff on this Paint configuration file, including making sure all the projects uses final classes. Also, for example, we use MB functions all the time, which is very important. Probably declare strict types. Here we go. Strict comparisons as well. This is actually a very important thing. So if you are using Laravel Paint, make sure you customize Paint to its fully power, basically, okay? So not only Paint, to be fair, PHP stan should be the same thing. I can see that he's using level max. Chat, I'm gonna tell you something. In theory, you should always go for level max. However, in reality, in web applications, I found it difficult to actually be at level max. Not because PHP stan is not good, it's because Latastan is actually okay, but not perfect to the level max of PHP stan. Okay? So I typically go to level 6 within my own Laravel applications, and I think it's enough. He is using level max, so, props to him, and I think it's awesome. However, don't feel, ashamed or guilt if you are using level 6 or level 5, because it's actually very acceptable and it's already a very good thing. So if you are using level 1 or level 2, that's actually a very good thing already. So if you can go to level 6 or level 5, that's actually a very good thing already. Level max, you don't have to go that way. You don't have to go that way. Anyways, regarding the tooling, this guy is using very advanced techniques already. I can see just by looking into his Paint.json, into his PHP stan, but also into his composer test, that a lot of the things he is using, it's actually from a very advanced PHP developer. This is actually a very good thing. And honestly, chat, if you guys know tools like Rector or PHP stan, you can call yourself a senior software engineer, chat, okay? Because this is actually very advanced PHP tooling, okay? And a lot of people, they tell themselves they have like 20 years experience, but they don't even know PHP stan or Rector. That's a red flag if they are as senior as they say they are. So I guess, let's just recap a little bit of everything we have seen today on this code. Overall, I feel like this is a very well-coded project in the sense that you can clearly see that the guy knows what exactly he's doing, is well-tested. It follows very good patterns, like having this test situation all set up here on my composer.json. He's using modern tooling. The code is very consistent, okay? Sometimes when you look at code, it's more about the code being consistent rather than just being wrong, okay? You might not, for example, agree with the usage of the service layer right here. However, it's kind of important that he is actually using the service layer all the time, okay? So sometimes, again, it's more important to be consistent than being correct or right, okay? And I'm pretty sure that if someone else would jump into this project, at least it would understand immediately how to write code for a new feature, because he could base himself on the all existing code because everything looks the same, okay? So again, consistency is a very important thing to follow on the code base, making sure everything looks the same. So I would say that this project is probably a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. So let's clap for this project from Amimi, which is undeniably a very good project. Congratulations. I'm going to give him a GitHub start as well. I'm going to send you guys a repo. Just be sure to clap to him as well. Very cool stuff right here, chat.